All right, welcome back to Hermit Radio. This is your host, Cameron, and I'm interviewing my childhood friend, Chris Tiller. Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself, man.
Hey, everybody. Like Cameron said, my name's Chris. Cameron and I have been friends since probably about the fourth grade, and obviously on up through high school and our young adult years. I'm an airline pilot, and I'm a musician. And here today to help Cameron talk about a couple of things that we've been talking about in relation to growing up together and his experience in the military and kind of the transformation that he's gone through in the years afterward.
Awesome. So it's funny that we're doing this because this is actually like a couple takes in. We've started over several times. And we ended up going out to dinner, my wife and I. We had Mexican food, and she loves going out, and she loves drinking margaritas. Every single time we go to Mexican food, it's always about the margaritas. And I think I think that's how I'm going to try and start every podcast. Maybe we should all just have a drink in hand ready to go.
And tonight's special.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, I wouldn't say that anything about our special. I feel like, we grew up like most average American kids. I feel like Chris and I, when we were younger, like he said, we met in grade school. On the weekends, if we wanted to go out and do something, if we wanted to go somewhere, like go to the movies or go do laser tag or anything like that, we would go work and earn that money. My parents would always tell me if I wanted to go do something or if I wanted something, I had to earn the money for it. So instead of going out and always doing it by myself, Chris and our other friends, we always got together and did it together. And it was kind of like a team thing. And we did that all the way up until high school. And that was kind of like the small team friendship that we had that I feel like we still have today.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree. And, I think that, that has shaped us, all of us, in terms of work ethic and personalities to this day.
For sure. And then when we were teens, like when we started going to high school, I feel like that was pretty average too. I wouldn't say there was anything too crazy. But on the other hand, you definitely went through some hard times in high school. I remember because I was there. I tried to be there for you. And we had discussed that earlier before the show. We were talking about that. And I'll go ahead and let you talk about that when we were in high school, some of the things that we did that you noticed, some of the things you were saying about me earlier.
Yeah. One sticks out kind of as on top of the rest is, like you were saying, I went through some pretty difficult things with my family, especially during the middle and later high school years. I think this has probably got to be sophomore or junior year in high school or something. I had been kept home for probably a week or more, maybe 2 weeks. And at some point, I'm doing the dishes in the second story, my parents' house. And I look out back and it's dark and I see this light. And I look down and it's Cameron waving his arms. And this guy, I think, had jumped several fences in my family's neighborhood just to get into my backyard to make sure that I was all right. Because I hadn't really had any way to get out to to any of them what was going on or why I wasn't at school or anything. So just kind of disappeared off the map for about a week or two. So this guy, in the middle of the night, probably 16, 17 years old, hopped several fences to get into my backyard just to see that I was all right. And, that really speaks to, not only the friendship that he and I had or that he had with anybody else, but also, the kind of guy that he is. And he's always been that way. You've always been that way, just to kind of, you do whatever it takes to look out for the people that you care about. And you're never really the kind of guy that would take no for an answer or care too much about the risk to yourself.
Yeah, and so that's what this particular interview is going to be about. That's what today's segment is going to be about, is change.
Yeah.
Right. How I started and came to be.
Yeah.
And then I guess I could say, dark times in the military, but a disclaimer, this is not like, I'm not trying to say anything negative about the military whatsoever. It's a job like any other. And first and foremost, I volunteered to do it. I signed my name on the dotted line. So anything that happened to me while I was there, it was my own choice. I don't blame anybody for anything that happened to me. I don't blame the war. I don't blame the government. Everything that happened to me was because I chose to be there to do what I thought I was doing that was right. I wanted to serve my country. And that's the bottom line, That doesn't change the fact that I did obviously see some things and I had some experiences I've talked about on this show before. I was blown up. And so, that's not good for anyone, and it doesn't matter if you compare it or if you say, well, he was just blown up. It's not that big a deal. I know people who've killed 10 people or whatever. It's all bad. Anybody can have PTSD. You can be a bus driver driving kids and something happens on one particular day and you can have PTSD. It is not necessarily exclusive to the military. So I just like to put that out there for anybody that's listening. I know some of my friends are military guys, so I just don't want to get it messed up. It's not like I'm blaming anybody or the military. But moving forward, we had a pretty average teenage high school play out. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I think when things changed for us as our group of friends was when we graduated high school and we all went our separate paths. I went active duty military. You went to school to be a pilot, and our other friends went their other ways. I feel like that's when we changed the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Going back to talking about how we grew up, you're absolutely right. I think that we had a pretty, I would call it average, late 80s, early 90s American childhood. We were obsessed with James Bond, and it was kind of a big driving factor behind us going out and raking leaves and pulling weeds on our weekends was when the new James Bond movie would come out. And I think the first words you ever said to me when I came to school, when I moved to the new school, was, "Do you want to be more? Do you want to be a spy?" And
yeah,
and that kind of was that really was the beginning of our friendship, and that was kind of how we spent our afternoons and our recesses, was playing Star Trek out on the playground and researching old World War II and Cold War and Soviet era espionage stories and spy stories and stuff like that. Being that this particular show is kind of talking about change, I wanted to highlight kind of your experience from my perspective. As we were growing up, you were really, we all kind of did identify the greatest generation, as the epitome of brotherhood and camaraderie and honor and valor and stuff in terms of the military, combat veterans and stuff as being these heroes. And but that was kind of your perspective going into all of this, and that was the type of person that you grew up trying to be, and that was the kind of person that you were going into the military trying to present yourself as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, I never tried to think of myself as brave or as wanting to be a hero. And I guaranteed anybody, if you were to ask anybody in the military that I served with, if any of them thought I was a hero or brave, you probably wouldn't find that many. And that's because when you're in the military, it's not about that. It's about being a soldier. It's about being disciplined. It's about doing what you're supposed to do. That other stuff happens, but it's not a part of it. It's not something that you go around talking to each other about. And that's where I feel like a lot of people probably get a little confused when they go into the military, because they go in with that, band of brothers mentality. And it's
Propaganda
honestly,
image.
it's not like that. It's very different. And that's fine, because it is what it is. And I don't think that there's any better way to have soldiers and to train them. I just don't. I think that the way that I was trained and the way that I was serving, I feel like that was the best way, made us the best trained. And that brings me to my next point, was that so every now and then when I was in the military, we would actually get to be able to hang out. If I came home on leave or something like that, we got to hang out. And would you say that, like, I definitely taken a very different turn after I started coming back home after that?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that speaking from my perspective, how I saw you, we got together in what I would call snapshots. In terms of what we're talking about in terms of change, I think we would hang out in different snapshots of your life over the last I don't know, call it decade. The last time I can remember hanging out with you before you deployed was the night before I left for college. We went on like a 15-mile ruck march
Yeah,
and loaded down with gear, and got most of the way through it. And I think your mom had to pick us up at the end of it. but
that's right.
uh, but even up to that point, after going through basic training with the delayed entry program, and knowing that you were going to get deployed, it was, your attitude was still very much that of the um, idealized soldier. You still identified the uh, perspective that you had before about what your experience in the military was going to be, and the Band of Brothers type of ideology and mentality, like you were talking about before. And I think the next time we hung out after that was probably just right in the middle of your deployment, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that would have been, I think we discussed before, that would have been right before you had gotten blown up. So you hadn't been blown up at that point, but definitely, I had noticed a change in your demeanor and your mentality and your candor. You weren't excited to go back. That was a big part of it. And yeah, I think a lot of it was that the perspective on what you were doing over there, or your experience rather, was much different. And we started to see a change, metamorphosis into the person that we would see Cameron post deployment, and in the years after the military. And that was this kind of a starting to deteriorate down into a kind of a sense of anger and outward bitter resentment and defensiveness towards the world.
definitely. And that's gonna bring us into the next spot, which is definitely how I was after deployment and then towards getting out. Mm-hmm. And so my view on this part was that after I'd gotten back from Afghanistan, I was actually really pumped about the military. I had this like crazy view of things. I wanted to go to Ranger School. I had just gotten promoted. And, I really had wanted to go back to Afghanistan again. I don't know why. I felt like I had to. And then I remember the day that it happened. I had just re-enlisted for another 4 years to go to Fort Campbell. And like a week after that happened, I woke up one day and I said, oh my God, what did I do? I was like, I don't want to do this for another 4 years. And it changed from that day. I don't know what happened or what was different that day, but that day moving forward, I didn't even want to be there anymore. And but I still had another whole 4 years to go after that point. And it honestly was like a downhill spiral from there. I thought maybe going to Fort Campbell would give me a different look on the world and a different look at the Army, so that I couldn't judge it from just one place. And that was not the case. It was the same situation every place I had gone to. And that's just because I had just gotten tired of it. It's not because it's bad. It's just because I got tired of it. It was miserable. And I didn't end up going back to Afghanistan again. And so it was just 4 more years of training and being a garrison army.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's, that I think is when, we saw the worst of it. I honestly think that the worst of the changes that we saw after your deployment really happened during that 4-year period. I think part of it was that, it was hard for you to find a purpose in what you were doing. There was a lot of outward and bitter resentment towards the world, and it kind of manifested itself in a lot of different ways. I mean, there was some alcoholism that was involved for sure. And then, quite a few instances of just, indifference really to the world. I mean, there was one particular occasion that I can remember that kind of, I think this is shortly after you had started bodybuilding, but we'd all gone out. I think it was for sometime around either your birthday or Christmas. I can't remember when you had come back. And we had all gone out, and I think it was you and me and your brother and our other friend Josh. And I'd gone to a couple of bars and stuff, and we'd all gotten pretty trashed. And I think you just went into this rage mode because this guy in one of the bars, I can't remember what he said to you. What he said something to you about the military, I think.
Yeah, I don't even really remember that, but that goes to show the state of mind I was in.
Yeah, it was something, and me and Josh just looked at each other. I think because you got this look on your face, like I'm gonna murder this guy.
Yeah.
And it took a really dark turn really fast, and I think we walked out of the bar, and I think you tried to pull like a street sign out of the ground, or no, you tried to pull a tree out of the ground, and then you punched a street sign. And picked up a trash can lid, one of those big heavy metal ones off the top of one of the trash cans, and hurled it across the street, Captain America style.
And to be clear, the reason why I asked Chris to share this story is not obviously for any egoic reason, but it's mainly to prove a point that I was that way at one point. I had some real problems, and no matter how many times my bosses in the army told me to just suck it up and deal with it, or the counselors that I went to go see while I was still in the military, they told me to just suck it up, do what you can. And that's what I did. And that was the end result. But ultimately, I was looking for change. I was looking for something else, but I was going to the wrong place. It was my own problem. It was something that I needed to fix. Nobody else was going to do it for me. My bosses in the army weren't going to do it for me. The counselors in the army weren't going to do it for me. I mean, they have such a horrible job as it is. I don't blame anybody in those positions. It's awful. Those counselors sit and listen to guys talk about their worst nightmares every day, all day long, and that's all they get. And no matter what they say, half the time, you don't really know if you're actually making a difference or not.
Yeah.
And so that's a tough job, and I think anybody that does it. But for me, it wasn't a problem that I was going to solve with pills or with talking to people about it. Those were steps, but ultimately what came to the next part, which is the change aspect of it, was when I started looking inward on myself and doing some self-reflection. I started meditating. I started enjoying life more.
Yeah.
I met my wife and her son, and they became part of my life, and I got married. And my wife was the first person that I decided to choose to be a good person for. I decided that she wasn't going to put up with my poor behavior if I kept behaving this way. I couldn't. And so I decided when I met her that I wanted to start to change. And then over time, smaller things started to change, and I started to kind of let go of those things. And then when I got out of the Army, I thought for sure I was going to be good to go as soon as I got out. And that was definitely not the case. When I got out, I went and started working immediately, and I figured that everything would be fine. And it wasn't. Nothing had changed. Now I was just mad for some other reason, right? When normal people walk through the door at my work, they could be doing nothing. Or they could be coming at me and yelling at me for absolutely no reason, but they feel justified because they're the customer, what have you, name any situation. And I did what we all do. I reacted. I would get defensive and I would get upset. Why are these people talking to me this way? Don't they know that I'm a veteran? Don't they know I'm a war veteran? Of course they don't know that. How could they possibly know that? It's not, I don't walk around with a hat on my head that says war veteran, and there's no reason to. And it's not like I should either, because that means something to me. It doesn't have to mean anything to anybody else. And those are the kinds of things that I started to realize when I had time to think, when I had time to myself to sit and meditate or reflect. And then I started changing, and I started treating everyday life as a learning lesson. Anytime I got overly upset or mad about something, I would legitimately ask myself, why did I get so upset about that? And if I couldn't think of a good reason, then I accepted that there probably was no good reason for me being that upset. And when you start to do that, it happens all of the sudden, kind of like a roller coaster. It gets faster and faster and faster until you don't even realize you're doing it anymore. And that's the key. That's the goal. That is the thing that I learned on this journey. But Chris, it means nothing for me to say these things, and that's why I have you here, because I want you to tell everybody listening, like, what kinds of things have you seen change in me as of the last 6 months since the last time you saw me?
Yeah. Well, I'll start just a tiny bit back farther than that. You talk about, the first time you started experiencing change, and that's kind of when I saw it as well. Would be shortly after you met your wife, and I think you had been bodybuilding for a little bit at that point, and I think you still were. But you talk about the level of introspection that you started to experience as a result of your meditation and your inward thoughts. And that really had an incredible impact, I think, in your outlook on life, as well as your general attitude towards things. You had stopped drinking already as a result of the bodybuilding, so that wasn't something that was in your way. And so that was already kind of out of the way for you. But once you took that step towards self-enlightenment, you had spent more time meditating and reflecting on your actions and reflecting on your past, and I think more importantly, reflecting on what you wanted your future to be like. That's when I saw the most immediate change. Now, in the last 6 months, there's been an explosive transformation that I've seen. Before we get into to any of the things we were talking about before, in terms of some of the remote viewing and other things like that, just on the emotional side, if you met Cameron today and you talked to him in person and had any sort of interaction with him, or became friends with him, you would have absolutely no idea about anything of the things that we discussed about his past. He is an incredibly gentle person. He has patience and understanding and a humor about things, a sense of humor about the world, and a sense of humor about life that is becoming of a monk. I mean, seriously. He's a great father figure for his wife's son, and he's a great husband towards his wife. And to see this man caring so much for those two people, let alone the other people that he cares about in his life, his family and his friends, and to have really no concern for his own personal needs, and not a drop of anger or violence, at all. Not an angry or violent bone in his body. It's a complete and total transformation.
Thanks, man. And it's definitely, I guess, the whole point of all of this, what I want to close this out on is that if you ask anybody that really knows Cameron, or Sergeant Harmon, for anybody that was in the military with me that remembers, I was not that way. Everything you just said, I would have been the complete opposite of. And I'm not even hating on that. It was who I was for a time that I needed it.
Yeah.
I needed to be that way, and I needed to do those things for that time. And it was a good learning lesson. I learned things from it. I met some really wonderful people, and I had some life experiences that led me to where I am now.
Yeah.
But once I felt that, when I finally had that aha moment, and I was like, man, this is really nice. Like, I feel like I can breathe a little easier. My almost next immediate thought was, I need to share this with other people. It's something that everybody should get to feel at some point in their life. Everybody's holding on to something, some type of pain or fear or anger or sadness or depression. Everybody's got something. And they're to. And some is bigger than others. That is for sure. And it might not be something that you can let go of. But there are definitely tools, and there are definitely ways that can make life a little bit easier. And those are the things that I feel like have helped me, and those are the things I want to help share with everybody. Chris, thanks for being on the show, man. I think we're going to go ahead and cut it here. But yeah, man, any last things you want to say to the people listening?
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you inviting me to the show. It's been a pleasure being here for sure. And guys, the best thing that I can think of to say to you about all this is, there are plenty of reasons to continue about your path in life the way that you've been doing things. But if you're here and if you're listening to this podcast, there are also plenty of reasons to change, plenty of reasons to find a new path for yourself. And if that's what you're here for, if you're here to find a new path, or if you're just here for enlightenment or here to wake up, give everything, give everything that he's saying a second thought, and try to spend some time during your day, some introspective time, meditating and thinking about the direction that you want your life to go in. And it'll definitely help. I know that it's helped me quite a bit.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been Herman.